Hi all, today I wanted to tell you about the HS6 Electone organ from Yamaha and the editor I made for it using Webmidi. It's very handy because it's Webmidi, so you can actually use it with any browser supporting Webmidi. So it doesn't matter if you use a computer, Mac, iOS, Android, whatever, because it's running in a website. Why I bought the HS6? Well, it was cheap and it's fun. The parent of the HS series is the HX series, which has a massive 8 operator FM engine. However, the HS series have a 4 operator FM system. It's based on the OPZ chip from Yamaha, and that's the same chip which is inside of the TX81Z and DX11, if I'm not mistaken. So it basically means you have some sort of H-channel MIDI device, organ synthesizer. In the organ though you don't have all the H channels, but some of the sounds are stacked together to one or another channel. So you don't have really 8 different channels, but maximum of 5 for receiving. Sending is always 3. You have an upper part, a lower part and a pedal part, which is the bass of course. The upper part can consist of 2 plus 1 voice, and the lower part 1 plus 1 voice. On top of that, on the lower keyboard you have your rhythm settings, so your chords, etc., which can run with arpeggio chords, and your pedals of course play the bass. However, you can switch it so that the bass can be played from the lower keyboard as well. On top of that you have some effect sections. Here is a reverb. You can have Celeste or symphonic mode, a chorus or tremolo, and you can choose between a flanger and a delay for several parts of the voices. I will give you a close-up in a moment from the panel in comparison to the editor I made. So why I bought this? Well, because it's basically in TX81Z and uses the same engine. You have a very nice FM synthesizer for operator. Although you can only store 4 user voices, and a user voice you can link to a part here. To those parts you can assign also some other sounds which are in there. I believe there are a total of 60 different sounds plus 4 user sounds. However, when I was building the editor I came across a lot of different other sounds which actually are not reachable directly from the organ itself and only can be accessible by using sysex data. So all in all it has quite some sounds in it, and plus the 4 user voices you can, well, make from scratch. That said, even that you have only 4 places to use for your own sounds, you can adjust the sounds currently on the panel. If you switch in a different registration, basically combi or performance called on all the synthesizers, you lose your settings, but when you send sysex data to it, you can manipulate all the voices which are currently selected. The goal was to make a voice editor for it, so I could program my own voices into the 4 user slots. That was the start of the idea. Before I could do that, however, I had to find out all the bytes in the sysex data, because it's not documented in the manual. The only thing in the manual is some basic settings, how to perform a dump, and you have your starting byte and your manufacturer code, some other bytes, then a part data and the end of sysex command. But actually that data part, what is the most interesting of it, it's not documented. I have searched the internet, I have mailed Yamaha support, and they cannot or don't want give me the details, so I had to find them out myself. I came across a Yahoo group. Some people started already trying to figure out how it all works, and they came quite far. However, no one actually restarted for the performances, so the registration, so as it's called in an organ. So I started doing that, and after I had this, I dove into the user voices. If I have here my editor, this is a big touchscreen, however there are some dead spots, so it might seem that the editor is not working, but that's basically my touchscreen not responding. So what I can do is calling up all the registrations. It's using RPC, yeah, to connect with my computer over there wirelessly, and from there the MIDI goes through my MIDI boxes to the organ. So it loaded everything here. It's probably hard to see from the distance. I will show it more closely in a bit. So when I press the registrations here, you see stuff is changing. Some changes are just minor, some are more clear. That's a dead spot. So. And you see all the settings, have some lights in here which show if it's on or off, reflects the settings here. Maybe you can see it, maybe not. Number 8 is on now because I press it here, and now number 7, but also vice versa I build in, so if I press 1 here, number 1 is highlighted, and of course the changes are made as well. I built also an option to save those registrations, so you can mess around a lot, save your settings to the organ and later save it to disk. So if you want to recall all performances or registrations, you can simply load them again and send it to the organ, and you can go. Most of the buttons here you see are the same as the buttons here. However, here is a large menu with a scroll wheel, and it remembers me of my old Yamaha MK100 keyboard I had in the past. It had the same idea with the scrolling menu, and in the menu there are a lot of settings. For instance, here you have a vibrato part and a sustain part, and the settings for that, so the details, can be set around here. Vibrato depth, vibrato speed, delay, for the sustain, the max level for the sustain, etc. And also some other changes which are not on the panel. Like here I have 3 buttons, but all the settings for these buttons are in here. And those are the 3 buttons, that one, that one, that one, and those 5 here and those 3, 4 here actually are settings in the menu. So I took them all out and placed them on the front end, so I can access them directly instead of scrolling through the menu and finding the right spot. I did, however, use the menu in a slightly different way. I used steps. On the first item from the menu you have your registrations. So on the panel you have 8. The bigger brother HS8 has 16 of them, and the buttons are here instead of here. But I only made it for the HS6. So here are 8 registrations which you can program yourself, and in the menu there are 19 plus variations, so 38 different preset registrations, and you can select them by just pressing the button, which are the same as those buttons here. Then there is a rhythm menu. Although you have here a lot of rhythms already, you have some more in here, 18 sorry, plus a variation, so twice again. And the last button is to restore the original pattern set on the organ itself by a name. On the organ, every sound section has one button, the first one with a little square on it, which means you can assign a different sound to it. So 3 are always these sounds, but you can, the fourth one or the first one, you can assign a different sound from the menu. And those are in here, 3-1. Or you can assign your user voice to it, which is here. Then while compiling basically the sysex data from the registrations, I found out there are some different settings for the factory reset. And you have 5 registrations here, performances if you like, which uses sounds which are not in the organ. Well, they are in, but you cannot reach them yourself. So I collected them and put them here as well. So here are 5 factory defaults. And then over here I have 10 spots of 20 sounds from sounds I found in the organ, which are not accessible from the organ itself. Well, this is the complete registration part. On top of that, of course, you have your user sound spots, and therefore I made a voice editor. It has 4 user voices, like I said, so I asked for the user voices. It's loading them, and here are all the settings for a voice. It's basically the OPZ and TX81Z, like I said, So most of the settings are the same. However, the way the system exclusive is constructed is totally different. So you cannot simply take a sound from the TX81Z or DX11 and put it in the organ, because it doesn't work. The order of bytes is totally different, and in some cases the meaning as well. The TX has some features the organ doesn't have, but on the other hand, the organ has features the TX doesn't have. So those bytes are different. For instance, you have your aftertouch here, which can control the vibrato speed, and for the lead, as an extra, the lead sound here, there is also an attack vibrato. So in the first part of the sound, you can have a different vibrato setting than in the rest of the sound, and those features you only find in organs like this and not in the other DX series basically. It has aftertouch on both keypads, and the big one, the HS6, even has aftertouch on the pedals. This one doesn't, but that's not a problem. Also here I have made save user voices, so I accidentally pressed it so it saves it directly. I can save a single voice, then it's the current voice selected which will be saved, and I can load a voice. That's one I converted before, because that was the whole goal, be able to program the user sounds. So what I did was finding out what every byte means, and actually what the bits in those bytes means, and then making a converter. So I could convert all my DX21 or DX100 and DX27 sounds into a compatible version for the organ, and I had like 10,000 sounds or something. I didn't convert them all yet, but I wrote an editor, converter, which basically takes those sounds, convert them in a way the organ understands. I have to make some small adjustments, so it also will be able to import, for instance, the TX81Z, DX11 sounds and convert them into what the organ understands. It's a touchscreen. Like I said, I have some dead spots in here, so not everything will exactly work. But if I am changing, playing something, let me see, user voice 1, let me get my different sound. The four user sounds here are of course handy, but like I said, you can manipulate the panel sounds as well. So what I'm now going to do is load my lead voice. Maybe you saw it, stuff changed. That's the ADSR or ADDDR, how is it called in FM. Let me get rid of this thing. So the cheaper DX synths, DX100, 21, 27, only have one type of waveform for the oscillator, This one has, like the TX81Z, 8 different waveforms. They are all based on sine though, so there's no square or sampling hold or whatever kind of triangle wave shapes, but they are all built on the sine wave. The first one is a pure sine, and the other ones are selections of harmonics from the same sine waveform. Some changes are clear, some are so minor you will not hear the difference. Frequency, of course. And fine frequency, it's sort of a detune, but not exactly. Detune make way smaller changes. It's more like a bigger offset, and it really has an offset. It also has a fixed frequency, so normally you are working in a ratio mode. That's normal with the FM, but it also has a fixed mode for the operators. Then over the whole range of your key you have the same tone basically. Most of the time that sort of stuff is used for the modulators and not for the carrier. So on 2, 3 and 4, depending on the algorithm you choose for your FM. It has 8 algorithms, though standard. I made a picture here so you can see. Here's the feedback level for operator 4. Portamento time, slide level. Slide level is this. Let me see. That's what I mean. I have to go in here to find the correct one. It's a sort of bend, but it's fixed. But the level of amplitude can be set using the slide. Okay, aftertouch sensitivity, LFO speed. For the LFO there are 2, and those have a saw, rectangle, triangle and a noise version. And depending on the setting, if it's amplitude modulation or pitch modulation, you have a switch here. If you want to use amplitude modulation, you also have to switch on the amplitude modulation in the operator itself. I'm not very deep familiar with FM, so I'm just going to try stuff. I switch this one on, that one on, that one on. Let's see what mess we can make. There's a dead spot. Like that. And for the PMD, that's that LFO attack time, so where the vibrato or whatever effect you want to put in there, you have a first the first start takes a while, and then it switches back to the normal operation basically. It's maybe not so easy to hear because of the volume, but that's basically the editor. You have here some velocity settings because it has aftertouch, but also touch velocity, normal key velocity like synths and keyboards and piano, whatever. Here's some harmonic settings which work when you use a modulation wheel, and this key scale types, etc. And well, I made this just to load the voices from my old DX21 and 27 I had in the past. So I just pick one, choose file, and I want, let's say, Perco piano, well, hard times, fine. I open it and everything is changed, and I could send it now to a voice which I want. That's done by voice save. If I press voice save, I get a pop-up saying, okay, select the voice you want to save it. I'm not going to do that. I just press user 1. Let me see what else. I think I accidentally saved it anyway. Okay, that was not user 1. Back to the registration. You can see here some white text, and those are those buttons which have a little square on it where you can load a different voice, also the user voices. And what I did is putting the name of the voices there on the buttons here, so it's easy to see that something is assigned to it, and you don't see that on the organ. You can, but you have to dive into the menu, press that button, and the linked voice, if any, will show a light, but this is more convenient. Let me see. User 2, user 3, user 1. Now that's difficult now. Okay, I will try. Let me switch this off, that off. That sound is the sound I saved into user 1. I had to switch everything else off, else you will hear the rhythm and the low orchestral sound and whatever. So that is the sound I accidentally saved in user 1, but that's not a big deal. Well, that's basically it. As you can see, it is a website, so it just runs an HTML file with some JavaScript, and therefore it's awesome because you can basically use Webmidi on any device capable of using Webmidi plugin. Chrome, Google Chrome has its standard built-in. Some others support it too. iOS or Safari basically is not well known to support it, but if you use Chrome for iOS or Chrome for Mac or whatever, you can simply use it and write your own Webmidi solution without having to really be a programmer programming in C or Delphi or whatever language, but you can basically use some simple HTML and JavaScript, if you know it, to build your own editor or whatever you want. I will now make a small zoomed version of the organ and the editor, so you have a better view what is happening. So here you see the organ, there's the reverb, the orchestral voices, the combination voices and the orchestral voices for the upper keyboard. That one is for the lower. There's your pedal, your bass sounds, the arpeggiation. It's a chord type arpeggio, not really a note sequence type of arpeggio. Percussive voice you have here, and your user lead. Here are the rhythms with a balance between more bass drum or more the metals sounds like hi-hats. That's the balance between them, and the volume. Next to it you see the ensemble. The thing is, here basically you select here which sounds you want on the upper and lower keyboard to sound. So you can put your upper combi, upper orchestral and upper percussion all to this first upper keyboard, and it will give the sound of combined of all the four voices. And for the lower part goes the same. Of course, for the lower part you have your chords which drive the arpeggio thing and the bass as well, if you choose to. Below here you have the rhythm start, stop. Start and stop is the same button, single start. It has an intro and an ending. There are two fill-ins and a user one. You can program two user fill-in, no, one user fill-in per registration. And for the rhythms you can program two of your own rhythms. And the same goes for the arpeggio chord. You can make your own chords scheme for your arpeggio. And to record it all, you can switch your keyboard into percussion mode or your pedals into percussion mode, so it will make your drums can be heard. Also can be done through MIDI channel 15 in this case to enter the drum machine basically. Here are some other effects like the tremolo, the symphonic and the flanger delay. So it's either tremolo, symphonic or flanger or delay. You cannot combine, for instance, the lower orchestral you see in every part, but only one of them can be active. So if I change it, you see it switch off there, and now it's switch off there, and whatever. Here are the registrations. The red button you press to and hold for storing the registrations, and 49 is the current speed. And here you have the menu, and when I scroll through it you see all the options. Some of them has been shown in the web editor as well. So it's like 12 menus, I think, or 10, 12. Here's the editor. So here you have your panel registration, this button. It gets all the registrations currently in the organ. Actually it gets all 16 because there is no difference in calling it for HS 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8. You get them all. You only can use 8, sorry, on the first 4 versions, and only the HS8 can use 16 of them. The save panel registrations will save all the registrations to disk in a sysex file, and the bestand kiezen, it's Dutch, is choose file. You can load your saved registrations. Well, here are all those sliders and buttons and whatever. Sorry about the glitch. Battery of the recorder died. So here you have the bass voices, orchestral voices, and like I said, you can see here the name of the voice which is assigned to the special one, with the small rectangle, and it's basically the same as on the organ. As you can see here, you see the small rectangle that can be assigned. In this case I assigned an electric bass to it. Here on top you have the registration menu, so all the way up to 19 plus variation. You have the rhythm venue, those here, all the voices which are standard in the organ, including the user ones, and all the factory presets. And here till here are the 10 extra banks of voices. So there are 192 extra voices not directly accessible by the organ. One of the interesting parts is for the orchestral voices. There is some hardware included in the organ, which make use of some sort of filter, and only the orchestral voices can use that filter. So although you have the option available to assign the same sound to orchestral or lead or percussive voice or whatever, if you assign it to the orchestral voice, they might sound different because of that filter. The details of that filter are not completely clear, so I did not expand them all and gave names to it, whatever they mean, but I added them to the editor, and I could set stuff up here if I wanted, but I have to dive deeper into it to exactly know what slider does what and what it does mean. All I know is there are some options to a 2-pole, 3-pole, 4-pole filter and kind of things here. The voices have an option to enable the filter, which of course only work in case it's assigned to an orchestral voice, else whatever setting here is done doesn't matter, just doesn't work. well, that's about it. So back to the registration. On the HS6 or any other than the HS8, you will not find any settings for the pitch wheel and the modulation wheel, but I found them out from one of the guys who was a member of the Yahoo group, which owns an HS8, and I asked him to do some registration dumps where he switched some of those off and on, and I was able to figure out which byte or which bits in a byte were manipulating these settings here. So I included them on my editor as well, and funny enough, if you set them and you use an external controller, at least the lead voice is really accepting those commands for modulation wheel and pitch wheel. Haven't been able to get the upper orchestra working yet, but maybe it needs some hardware, or maybe I did something wrong. I will dive into it another time. But that's about it. So here's the assembling again, where you can select which voice should be playing on a certain spot on the keyboard, whether it's upper or lower if possible. And I will finish with a little music. It's not a complete song or whatever, it's just me playing something using the voices inside of this organ to give you an idea. Thanks for watching.